Recording in progress.
Four. Time to start the meeting.
Sounds like it's unanimous. All right, good morning. We just have some informational pieces to start and then just a couple of conversations to determine what we're moving forward with for the August board meeting. So I will start this morning. Sarah Oudenhoven has our special ed policy and procedures. She just wanted to share and present. This is something that I realize I put presentation, but I do believe
It's not a presentation.
we'll be
It's,
putting that on the board
Mhm.
agenda for August if you decide to move forward. with
yeah,
that.
so as a condition of funding under IDEA, every school district is required to establish the written policies, and that is directly taken from DPI. And so we go through them, we make sure that we are following all those policies, everyone is trained on that, we put our district information on the top and we put it on through. And those are the legalese that we establish all of our criteria, all of our work underneath. And that's that.
So in the past, we've put this on the board agenda to have the school board approve of it, and then I know it stays as a copy in the
Yep.
special ed department if anyone were to have any questions about our policies and procedures.
And we can absolutely put it on our website as well as we redesign that website, make sure that it's up there with our new information too.
Okay. Any comments, questions from committee?
One quick one, we can, I would change that or hope to change that to we will, but that's, my question.
Oh, yeah.
Where,
I think
where is it gonna be, where
It
is
should
it
be
going
under
to
the
be?
special education.
Access?
Access in the departments.
Okay. I'll ask two questions. One, has it changed from last year? And two, I don't want to say, does it need to change? How often is it reviewed against changes in current law? Obviously, we have Neola to help us keep our policies in line. Obviously, some of these things are the ordinances, regulations, et cetera, are gonna be changing, I don't want to say regularly, but potentially.
If DPI changes it, it is because the law has changed. That's
Right.
directly from DPI. So their legal team takes care of that. And then we adopt it, the school districts adopt it.
Got it. So is there any language in this document that, I'll say we created? Or is it more or less adopting DPI, standards?
There are a few things that I changed. The front page, I changed it to, instead of saying LEA agency, I changed it to say Watertown Unified School District. And then I changed the page numbers so
Got
that it aligned correctly.
Okay,
Otherwise, it comes from the legal department, and the special education team at the Department of Public Instruction. And it only changes if there is, a need to change based on law, and it did not change from last year.
okay, thank you. Those are my, both questions.
So, okay to put on an August.
Anything else?
resolution? Oh, sorry.
Otherwise, I don't hear any other comments, questions about that document. Yeah, please add it as a resolution to, I'll say adopt.
Adopt.
Thank you.
It's just a fact.
All right, thank you. We just saved some time. Good work. All right, next up, Jason is going to share with us a little bit more about the Wisconsin guarantee.
Thank you very much. There's a document included there that's really just an attempt to systematize the work. And so there's a great number of folks that work to kind of learn more about what Act 95 or the Wisconsin Guarantee really means and develop these systems. And I just want to give you an update around what those systems look like. Principal Kerr had talked a little bit about it when he talked about Laude. He also talked about the Wisconsin Guarantee and Direct Admit. And so this is just a follow-up to that. So if you look at the body of the document, the Wisconsin Guarantee, that first blurb there is really just a cut and paste from the website. And so just want to always remember like where this is coming from. There's a link there to the website, but this is just information that's coming from a collaboration between DPI and university systems. Just another reminder that the Direct Admit piece, which is not this, right? Direct Admit is our partnership with DPI and universities to, we ask students to opt in, and they are notified by schools that will directly admit them. There's no application process for that. The Wisconsin Guarantee is different. This is us signifying or identifying top 5% and top 10%, we tell those students they're in the top 5 or 10, they still have to apply. Okay, so again, systems are important because we want to rely on those procedures. We had to talk about, well, when will we capture who are our juniors? And so the team decided the last Friday of June, because we roll over our system early in July. So we're saying that's when we say these are our juniors. And so the last Friday in June. We talked about what juniors will be considered. Will we take any juniors out of the pool? Team was saying, nope, all juniors are juniors, and whoever we capture on that last Friday will be considered for part of this piece here. Then we talked about how do we identify the top 5%. Again, we're looking at the top 5%, and we're rounding down. It's interesting, and that is direct guidance from DPI and the universities. And so, for example, we have 500 juniors in a class, 10% would be 50, 5% would be 25, right? Those numbers are nice. If you start playing with the numbers and you get to 11.7, you're rounding down to 11. If that makes sense, always rounding down on the percents. So there's an example on the back, on the top of page 2. Again, the example here is 312, 5% is 15.6. They're telling us with no questions to round down to 15. Same with the top 10. We also had to think about how will we navigate tiebreakers if we have some number of students that are tied. And we created a list. And the first one is we typically use 3 decimal places to calculate GPA. In case of a tiebreaker, we checked with Skyward, we can go to 5 decimal places, which I'm pretty confident will take care of it. If that doesn't, then we'll use Laude. And then the last one is total credits earned by that last Friday in June. So we have 3 kind of procedures to navigate the tiebreaker. We talked about how we want to note this on transcripts. We want to keep it really simple. So at the top of these transcripts, just say Wisconsin guarantee top 5%, same for 10. And we always want to think about how do we communicate. So the team did a wonderful job of putting together a spring and an early summer message that was linked. And then we have a form letter that was already mailed because early admissions opened August 1st, so we want to hit that. And so folks that are in the top 5-10% for the high school endeavor is not applicable, they're too small, but eCampus and his families have received these letters. The other piece here, I think, as we talked about with Laude, is a policy that needs to catch up to this, and I think that work is ongoing. Questions? Please.
I have a couple. First one, final Friday of June. If you look at this year's calendar, the final Friday in June was the 7th. That was the last day that students went to school. So.
Final Friday in the month of June.
Oh, in the month of June. Sorry, I misread. Thank you. The second question is what's the significance? I'm not questioning, I'm just curious, what's the significance of snail mail to families? We're saying it's for all. Is that just to ensure that everyone gets it as opposed to that and email?
So the snail mail is, folks will receive a letter from us saying that they're in the top 5 and top 10 and notifying of them of that. And the notion on the transcript, because early admission opens August 1st, and we want them to be aware of their status.
Am I correct? Or am I mistaken things? I believe we got 2 letters this year. One was to this, because my daughter was in top 5. One was to the student and one was to the parent, same letter. Is that going to, where one goes to the student, one goes to the family, is that redundant?
Maybe, but we don't want to, we don't want folks to get lost.
Okay.
Thank you for.
Just high level, Jason, what is this, I'm gonna say, saving the student? Is it the ACT? Is it the application fee? Is it, obviously, the University of Wisconsin, or the system designed this to try to increase enrollment, presumably. I guess what barriers is this breaking down, aside from the fact of letting people say, hey, you know, you don't have to do anything and you're in, but do they still have to, I mean, I presume, it's been a long time since I filled out an application to go to a school. Cost me $50 to put in an application or take my ACT, which is another cost. But we do that automatically for all juniors, regardless. So is there any, I don't want to say cost like all financial, I'm just saying effort or paperwork, or, is there things that this is eliminating, or is it just increasing the awareness for in the UW system that you can go there without too much more effort from your perspective, or maybe in reality, I don't know, I'm just high level.
I believe that it does increase awareness. I think it also reduces stress, right? Because direct admit, those are separate, that's separate,
Mhm.
but it does not apply to Madison, La Crosse, or Eau Claire. This will impact, Madison. So Madison is really the top five.
Yep.
Smaller universities, top 10. So, you still have to apply,
Okay, so you still have to apply.
right? But it gives
Okay.
You're admitted.
You're in. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So stress is the big savings.
I think so.
Added
So the
bonus.
difference between direct and Wisconsin guaranteed, you technically don't have to apply for direct, is that correct?
Right,
You
so
can
direct
accept
admit, my son is a junior, right? So a couple weeks ago, he received a letter saying these are the schools you've been direct admitted to.
Right,
He had to then go in a form and fill out a form and say, these are the three that I'm really interested in, and he's in.
and that's what I was gonna ask you, because I did have another parent reach out to me, and even though my son was part of the direct admit, I guess I hadn't really looked into it, is there a deadline? I think there's some confusion if there's a deadline to accept that direct admit, or how that actually works out, and I know we're talking about
Yeah.
guarantee, but,
Check that.
okay, I was gonna email you, but I'm like, we're gonna be talking
That's right.
kind of about it
This
here.
is better. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
So
but I
direct
think that's a
admit is
confusion
now
for
the
some.
Students are notified, these are all the schools that you're
Right.
admitted to. Now the student says, I'm interested in these 4 out of 10, whatever, right?
Okay.
They're in. Direct, Wisconsin guarantee is top, we're identifying students in top 5, top 10. They're in these universities, but they still have to apply. And Wisconsin Madison is part of direct, Wisconsin guarantee, 2 things, right? Yeah.
Do you know, is there a modified, I look at the application, my kid's going through it right now. Application, letters of recommendation, essay, whatever, top 5, top 10%. Is there a modified version where it's just maybe, I don't know, I didn't look into it as deeply, where it's just maybe the application form minus the rest, I mean, obviously if they're top 5 or 10%. Is the essay and nominations, letters of recommendation, sorry, are those still part of the requirement?
I believe so.
Okay.
I have no information that would say that the application.
Right.
So any other discussion, questions, committee? Good. As far as an update to the full board or to the full community, they can read the meeting minutes. Or we can put a small section of this on the agenda, Jared, just to remind everybody what it is. I know this hasn't changed. I'm just wondering, does anybody else need to hear this more broadly in the public? Just to make sure that they're aware of it via the board meeting. Otherwise, we'll just put it in the meeting minutes and people can read it at their leisure. It's an interesting program. I'm sure you see it online or on news articles, or maybe even the Daily Times runs an article on direct admit or on Wisconsin guarantee. I just didn't know how well educated the public is on these topics. And if there's anything that we should do differently with this particular one to make sure that it is parroted somewhere. But
The somewhere, could that be when parents have their orientation meeting at high school, for example?
that'd be a good spot.
Where, they talk about, hey, there's opportunity for college coursework.
Yeah.
And you have the direct admit, and you have just a quick, that way it's still getting out.
I like. Yeah. Yep, I like that, Diana. So I'm not, That's not a mandate, Jared or Jenny, as far as the orientation packages, just let's make sure we highlight that if we can. Makes sense?
Yeah, we have a plan. This is new for everyone.
Right.
Both the Wisconsin Guarantee and Direct to Bid, and we have a time, high school folks from Endeavor, campus in the high school, and I will connect after homecoming when the dust kind of settles, say, how do we do anything we can do with them? So
Okay,
the discussions and planning are ongoing.
okay. Great, and I wouldn't see any reason to bring this back to Ed Services for any updates unless there's significant changes. It's not like it's gonna be an annual thing that we have to review, so it shouldn't make a calendar. Or unless there's some major policy or structural changes to how it's administered. So, okay,
Sounds good.
thanks, Jason.
All right, our next topic, is you'll note the several references to draft working document, on our, curriculum review cycle. What I attempted to do here was to document where we have been at, with some of our curriculum review cycles, and then trying to create a feasible and sensible plan moving forward. I think at this level, at this committee, we have talked about the fact that some of these have been coming sort of fast and furious in capacity for teachers and administration to be going through this process. And so this was an attempt to document it. I do want to point out that there are several areas that I have not necessarily put on this curriculum review, but working with our departments, knowing when we need to do that. I'd also like to point out that in my mind, it's really a standards review, and then determination of whether or not we need curricular materials to meet those. Want to be super clear that we're not committing any budget dollars on the purchase of new materials at this point. Some of these curriculum review or some of these curriculum purchases can be quite large, and we would not be embarking on a giant wholesale change if we did not have budget dollars supporting that. And so that's part of the needs analysis in year one. Again, we need to always be subject to change based on any changes in our standards or any updates at the state level. A perfect example of that is Act 20. Also, you know, in constant analysis of our data, if we're seeing some giant holes and we need to bump up a piece earlier, then we certainly will need to do that. And then again, that material purchase would be based on work through the C&I budget with consultation with the board superintendent and the director of business services. I do want to point out that I mistakenly, thank you, Diana, left off our 912 ELA. That was a process that Pam Suski and Aaron Meyer embarked on the same year that 8 was doing their analysis as well. Theirs was more focused on a review of standards and if their materials were meeting those. And so I do apologize because I did leave the 912 piece off of there as well. I was attempting to, oh, I love that it printed 3 pages. I was really trying hard not to get anything on that 3rd page. Oh, there's nothing on the 3rd page but the big draft stamp. So I was attempting to, like I said, sort of space them out so that they weren't all coming at once. As it relates to elementary, as you know, we're going through a process starting next year. We'll be analyzing our curriculum, determining if we need to move forward with a different set of materials per Act 20. Those materials are all what are referred to as knowledge building curriculum, meaning they implement science and social studies standards within the literacy materials. So you'll note that I've kind of divided out elementary social studies and science. The thought being that we would determine an adoption with literacy, get that under our belt a bit, and then analyze our science and social studies standards and determine what we might be missing, what's included in our literacy, and then take a look at science and social studies and see if there are any changes we need to be making with that. I then tried to loop them, if you will, so that eventually we're doing 4K through 12th grade processes, so that we're not trying to do middle school at a different time than elementary and high school and vice versa. I do realize that some places I put K-5, some places I say elementary. So I will try to get the language cleared up on that. But the hope would be by 2028, we are taking a look at K-12 math, then literacy, then science, then social studies. I debated where we were at with putting math or literacy first. We kind of engaged in both of those simultaneously. We have seen so far positive results with our adoption, specifically at the middle school. And I know that we are likely potentially adopting different materials at the elementary level. So those two are pretty staggered. I wanted us to have some time in the elementary materials before we brought literacy back up again. So therefore I selected math to go before literacy. Again, trying to avoid where we're at right now. We're at the elementary level, we're adopting new math, we're embarking on literacy almost immediately. And again, this is certainly subject to change and to input from the board as well. So that's a brief overview of what I was attempting to do with this document. To me, it's incredibly important that we have this. Going through the math process, I know there was some reluctance because it felt like, you know, if these materials aren't like the perfect match, like, are we ever going to get a chance to review this again? And I just needs, in my mind, to be a part of a process that we're going through on a pretty regular basis. So that is just a bit of an overview of where I am at with this document. Open to questions, feedback, or any other thoughts that folks might have about that.
Committee members?
I have a few additional. You
Yes,
did most of them.
I did my
You
best.
did your best. In the headings, one of the part, it says
Mhm.
midpoint review.
Mhm.
And I think you clarified this because if you're looking at it as a curricular study, you know, looking at standards first, then yes, that is the midpoint. Yet, if it's only year 2 of implementation, is it really a midpoint review? Because now they first really have their feet wet for maybe a year. So that was just a question. What are you thinking in that midpoint review? And does that fit?
That's a super great question, and perhaps that makes more sense in a later year. But to me, it's like a question of, like, we need to be looking at our data. Are we seeing a difference? Chris Malloy has been amazing. I've had conversations with our administrators. She's able to break down our data into very discrete skills. And so if we find that we're you know, lacking in a certain area, is there something that we need to add in to help support that area? To your point, year 2 would be awfully early to know that. But what I do know is that as we have been currently setting our goals with both literacy and math, that is sort of an ongoing process at the each building level. So you're right, year 2, we may not have enough data to be like, yep, we really know that we need to beef up the idea of base 10 in 3rd grade, because there's not enough in our current curriculum about that. So I agree with that is probably sort of part of that, you know, implementation and refinement, analyzing that data and figuring those pieces out. So I do agree that that's a midpoint is sort of an ambitious.
Yeah, Diana,
Points
I
there.
mean, Diana, just for clarification, is your concern, and I think it's a good question, is it that it's called midpoint when it's not at the midpoint, or that?
No, she hit it. She had the nail on
Oh,
the head
okay,
with it, because a midpoint you're looking at, is it working, is it not working? What do I
Right.
need to fix? What do we need to do? But you're really in year 2 and you really don't have new curriculum up and going until years 3 or 4.
okay,
And so to me, she hit the nail, but
okay,
if you're not to that point where you can get that data yet, it doesn't seem a review. But if she had something different in mind for midpoint review, I didn't want to put assumptions out there.
okay. Well, that's,
So-
I understood your answer, I didn't understand hers.
My
Thank you.
last-
You're
my
welcome in
last-
my chair any day, Diana.
No, the last one is social studies.
Yes.
I didn't see it anywhere under any self-study review, you know, whatever that way. So can you speak to that just a little bit? It's not following the same process as the others.
You're right, and I think the ESSER dollars played a role in, I think, a lot of these implementation pieces. And I think that does come to a case of capacity. We did not spend much time last year with our social studies department doing sort of a needs assessment and planning. We are building that into our process this year, as we're working with our CISA representative. I was just working with her just last week about what does our rollout look like. And the very first day that we're spending together is doing some of that self-study review analysis of where we're at with our standards and whatnot. We did not have an opportunity to do that last year with our other ongoing pieces. And so, again, working document, maybe at the end of this year, we may not be ready in social studies to move forward if we're making some sort of formal adoption. But we certainly have started in on that analysis of where we're at. And in this case, mainly 612. And if we need to start doing any tweaking or changes. So social studies might be something that, you know, we're moving into next year before we're really able to make any major changes with it. What I don't want is our teachers to feel any sort of like whiplash, like, whoa, that went way too fast and I'm not comfortable. Pressure is okay, like too fast is not going to lead to a successful implementation of changes.
I just didn't want to make any assumptions.
No,
Because
that's
I know-
totally fair.
And that is K-12 social studies, not just elementary, because down below,
Yes,
it has elementary, I'm
Yeah.
assuming in 2026, 27. That means elementary science and elementary social studies.
yes, thank you.
So that's where
Yep.
it's just, if it was K, you know, put the label before it, you know, whether it be
Yep.
K-12 science, K-12 that way. It's clear that if it has to break, this was K-5 and this was 612.
Yep.
It just keeps it consistent.
I agree, and I definitely agree with that piece too. And to be fair, we will have elementary reps on the social studies team just to sort of begin thinking about it, but I don't anticipate any changes happening with social studies at this point with what's happening in math and literacy at the elementary level too.
Were you still working for, was it social studies or science at the board? rep?
Social studies, I'm still looking for a board rep,
So if
there's-
someone wants to do it, they can do it. If you don't get anybody, like,
Okay, I'll put you on you're on the literacy one as well.
no, but I just wanted everybody to have
Mhm.
the opportunity, but I don't want it to be a vacant spot.
Mhm.
Craig?
So I wanna say, I do appreciate a timeline, how things are broken out, because I think it's a valuable tool to communicate what the intentions are with the, with budgeting and to prepare the staff for what can, what's up and coming. So I think that's a good thing. One of my questions would be, how will this then be communicated to the staff on a regular basis, you know, once a year or whatnot? That would be one question.
Mhm.
The other question would be, is the intention to put most curricula on a 7-year cycle? Because if that's the case, then, if I'm looking at, literacy in ELA, that comes up, in 2029, that would be 9 years. Wouldn't that be better placed at 2027, you know?
And I had a similar question, Craig, but if I understand this correctly, and I don't know if this answers or contradicts, but this is really implementing curriculum from year 3 to year 2. Because you're still using the old curriculum for the years 1 and 2 while you're reviewing before you implement. So it's actually closer to a 10-year cycle, year 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2. Right,
Well,
is
yeah,
that it?
because you're still going to be utilizing that curriculum, the old curriculum on year 1.
Yes, and 2, I think.
Yeah.
But so that's, I had the same question, I think, if that,
Mhm.
is that,
And it should work out to be 7 years. And I also don't want to like imply that every 7 years we're going to make a major change, like the change from elementary everyday math to Bridges, right? We could analyze where we're at and say, hey, this really is meeting the needs of our kids and we don't need to. What I will be honest with and say that I am not sure that we did as well as we should have is if we don't put a schedule out there and to your point, communicate it. What ends up happening is that we maintain We're not necessarily focusing on our standards when the state makes shifts in standards. We're not examining necessarily best practice with it. And we can get into a situation where we're using materials that are out of date and are not best meeting the needs of our kids. So I don't mean to communicate that like every 7 years, we're like wholesale changing what we have and throwing everything out that we've done. I don't want that to be the message, but I do want the message to be like, we are keeping up with best practice. We're focusing on where our standards are at the state level. We're focusing on the data and how our kids are doing. To your second question about literacy, what I was trying to do, and perhaps ELA would be a better way to document that in here, is that because our elementary folks will be adopting a new curriculum potentially in the fall of 2025, if we bump them up to 2027, I think is what your suggestion was, they'll only be like 2 years into that. And I really want to try to get it to be K-12. And to your point, you're right, the middle school will have invested and the high school have invested quite a few years in what they're using. I felt more comfortable with that because the initial data is telling us that we're seeing success there. And I think that's, first of all, I think that's super exciting myself, but I also think that that's a huge kudos to those teams and the amount of time and effort and energy they've put into that. And so I really debated like, what goes first, math or literacy, when we kind of try to get back to this K-12 piece. And again, I'm open to suggestion, but that was sort of my rationale as to why I put literacy
Sure.
second.
And then the reason for the question is just to get the rationale for it, but, you know, I also am concerned that if we're doing well in a particular area, we want to still maintain doing well.
Yes.
You know, long term, so.
Yeah, I agree.
Scared?
Just to add, and I think you guys know it's gonna it needs stating, and we need to state this often with things like this. This is an aspirational plan, right? This isn't 100% roadmap. It follows a line, all the things that I keep telling you that we need to have that we haven't had in a while. A vehicle replacement plan, a 10-year projects plan for facilities, right? We all know that these things, right, are linked to limited resources. So for instance, we can have this plan, but I will tell you that this school district, like many other school districts across the state, have deferred curriculum, right? Recycling, we've deferred maintenance, we've deferred other things because we have limited resources. But what having a plan like this has for us is it has a way to keep track of our data as to what was refreshed. What were our aspirational goals? What did we want to try to make commitments to? And it also is a communication tool to parents and other people as to when was the last time things were refreshed? How are they on schedule? What is coming next? So that if we do have resources, and if we do have the ability to get those things done, whether it's a vehicle replacement plan or a roof or curriculum, at least people know, right? And they know where we're headed. Again, this is more of an aspirational document than a roadmap.
Jared, along that line, and to answer Craig's other question, how is this communicated to teachers? How often should ed services use or review this? And then let's say that it does come up that 526 or 2425. Let's see what's in the, I don't say in the budget. The question is should it be in the budget? So how are you going to be able to use this with central office to say, okay, here's our budget for the next year, and it's time that we invest some resources in ELA or what have you. And so what's the timeline for our review and our communication? So Ed Service should look at it at the end of June, so that when you're building your budget, that's my question. When would it be good on the calendar to make sure that we're all on the same page, what has to be in the budget for the following year?
I think all of these kinds of plans, right,
Yep.
should be reviewed annually, anywhere between January and March.
Okay,
So we can start the budget development process.
that's what thank you.
And again, same with fiscal. Fiscal's gonna need to be starting to look at our vehicle replacement plans and, you know, all of these things then inform the budget.
Yep.
Talk about where are we going and what resources do we have, right? And that will help keep us on track. We haven't had a document like this for some time in this district. Therefore, we've gotten pretty far away from our plans, right?
Yeah.
And also it's harder to communicate too, what has been refreshed, what hasn't been refreshed to our public when we talk about, when I say we've deferred curriculum, we've deferred professional development, we've deferred, it's because we don't have these plans to be able to show what we didn't do.
So, if, had this document been in front of us in the first quarter of this year, what date window would we be looking at to refer to fiscal and the full board for pursuing a curriculum review? What year would that be? So we were at the beginning of we were at the middle of the 23-24 school year in first quarter of this year, which means that if we said, yep, we're gonna stick to the plan, what the budget would then happen later in 24-25, but it would really be for the 25-26 school year. Is that accurate?
So the good thing about the curriculum one is because we identified ESSER dollars and we are securing those into the future. Through an assigned fund balance, because that's what you assign that money to, right? We're closer to this document than some of the other pieces now for a little while. The problem is when those ESSER funds come due, right, and they're all spent, we still have to find out how we're gonna put hundreds of $1,000s into a budget that has zero right now.
Right, but, and so
It's had zero for a number of years because we've been deferring.
yeah, I don't want to say that that's not my question. My question is, if Ed Service is talking about it in the first quarter of a given year,
Mhm.
what curriculum year are we looking to recommend for inclusion in the budget?
It would be the following year.
Like, would it be 18 months or is it 6 months? You say the following, if I'm in January of 24 and we're talking about it,
Mhm.
we can't implement 25 or 24-25 at that point. The budget for that year's already been set. We'd be talking about the 25-26
That's
budget.
correct.
Okay, so it's not the following, it's essentially 18 months out. I just want to understand that that's what we'd be looking at if I'm understanding the
Yeah.
time when we say, yes, let's go, then the budget, and then the following year. So you're looking 18 months out.
But I think the piece that you're missing in that is years 5, 6, and 7 implement, that gets back to my question of the input review. There's conversation
Sure.
each year throughout, so there would be conversation at Ed Services. If this program isn't meeting the mark for standards, they're not gonna wait, my assumption, correct me if I'm wrong. You're not gonna wait until year 7 to say, hey, this didn't meet the mark. It's gonna be, hey, we need you to do something. So yes, we're gonna need to be looking at curriculum, or hey, this is meeting where we are right now. We're still gonna look at standard, but we've been looking at standards all along because it's gonna be standards based. It's gonna look different, in my opinion. It should look different than what we've gone through this first time around because we haven't done any of this before. I like the word refinement, because that's really what it's going to be doing. So it's not gonna be as abrupt. Am I correct in what I just?
Absolutely, and I feel like I'll use math as an example. That was a pretty heavy lift because I think we hadn't been following the changes in the standards and best practices. My guess is, and I'm just gonna like advance into the future. For example, this year, 2028, 2029. During this year is like when we're doing a heavy analysis of where we're at, what other materials might be out there, so that we have an idea budget wise as we move into a more formal adoption, like, do we really think that we're going to need to make a wholesale change that's gonna be hundreds of $1,000s worth of purchase? Is this more going to be an analysis to determine? And so this is why in this column and in this year, we talk about the budget piece. If we go through it and we say, you know what, there's, this new change and shift in our standards and our materials aren't meeting, then either at the end of this year or the beginning of the following fiscal year is when we would make the purchase, so that we would have the materials for this following year. So if you track through with math like that, so for instance, like elementary literacy, we've been having a lot of conversations at the elementary level with administrators, with coaches, and now our coaches are having this conversation with teachers during the Keys to Literacy training that they're doing over the summer. We're finding that we think there are probably holes. I'm anticipating, and I don't want to spoil it. I mean, I don't want to say like I've predetermined we're going to move on, but there's a lot of things indicating to me that during this year, we're likely going to need to make a larger purchase of elementary literacy curriculum. And that's what we talked about with our study or with our research proposal. And that, so that we're either purchasing at the end of this fiscal year or at the beginning of this fiscal year to have those materials and implementing those materials. You know, and it's not a perfect process. Maybe if you had asked me at the beginning of the math process, Diana, you'll understand this. I felt like our scores looked good with everyday math. I felt like we we're doing well. And I think that many of our elementary teachers on that team probably felt the same way. And then we did a deeper dive and realized, oh boy, we can be doing a whole lot better. And I think that everyone is excited about the direction we're going with math. So it's not foolproof. And I don't want to make a decision before we've gone through a process with a team. But I think you get a sense when you're going through that, whether or not you're going to need to make a major change or not. And then that's where you're working with the board and the business department to say, yep, we anticipate this is going to be a bigger change or probably a more costly purchase. So.
Okay, Craig?
Well, I guess my first thought would be if we're deviating from, you know, a growth plan of implementation of curriculum. And we'll say if you're 3, we have to call an audible and say, yeah, this isn't gonna work for us. There should be some questions about the process of the self-study and review. That we perhaps missed the mark when it came to planning for this particular curriculum selection. And we really need to have a serious conversation about that. Now, granted, Act 20, things like Act 20 happen, which are out of our control. But I would still expect that there's a conversation there about that.
Agreed.
The other thing is, what I appreciate about this, and I was concerned about, was the fact that the selections we made as a result of ESSER dollars are not going to become a fiscal cliff for the district. So I do think that this kind of helps alleviate those concerns, so thank you.
Okay, then I guess as long as this is drafted, I don't know if it requires full board approval or ratification. I think it, per our previous conversation, we just want to move it from draft to implementation and review it sometime in the first quarter. Is that consistent with what we just discussed here and more or less agreed to? It's for reference for the board, it's for reference for the administration, and Ed Services will review it sometime in the first quarter of each year to make sure there's no major adjustments necessary. Is that good?
Does reviewing it in the first quarter give us enough time if there's implementation steps in the first quarter, or do we need to review Q4 so that way it can be up and moving by Q1?
I would ask that to the people who actually have to put the boots on the ground.
I think, if we're doing it, like I said, with the intention of, it's really 18 months ahead of schedule, right? So that we can get that plan out, budget planning eyes and everything. Then I think we're in a better place.
All right,
Okay, I like it. Good job.
thank you, guys. All right, I will turn it back to Mr. Bull, an update on our assessment plan, and then our Renaissance contract.
Thank you. Before we go into that, I looked at the direct admit letter, Lori. And there is no specific deadline. It just says the sooner you complete this step, the closer you are to becoming a University of Wisconsin student.
All right, I will let my son know. The sooner you get on this.
Yes.
Gentle
Thank
thought.
you.
I'm gonna just talk about the assessment calendar, just like the curriculum cycle, this is as draft as it can be at this point. So this is draft, we're working really hard to say it's not a draft in the next 2 or 3 weeks, so we'd be ready for the start of the year to be able to communicate this across the district. This current version, I think it's important to note that really reflects hundreds of conversations, really starting in December thinking about what an assessment calendar could or should look like. And so I just want to thank the many people that have given me feedback and insights. This calendar is draft and a work in progress and different. Because of a number of things. One is that Act 20 has put us on hold on our assessment calendar. You know, there was a time when they said that a year ago, we would know what the screener would be. And then they said July, we would know what the screener would be. And then about 2 weeks ago, we learned what the screener was, right? So we've been waiting for that information. So that's impacted not only the calendar, but the draftness of the calendar. I think what you'll see also is that there's a desire, especially with partnership with Chris Malloy and I, a desire to elevate the voices of all stakeholders. So I'll talk more about it, but we're gonna have conversations with students and parents and staff members to elevate their voice. And then, I think it's also important, as Jenny mentioned in the curriculum cycle, there's a strong desire not to overwhelm people, right? Our elementary folks are navigating a new math resource, doing some research and literacy, Act 20, learning about keys to literacy. And so in an ideal world, I think this calendar would look a little different, but we want to be mindful not to overwhelm people. So you'll also see two quotes. One is a STAR quote, which is Renaissance. I can answer questions, but I've signed that. It's not, we haven't paid anything. I know it's over the 20,000 threshold. We worked with Sarah Duncan, a director team, and talked about that and signed it saying that we're interested. It's important to note that it's a 1-year contract. Typically, we've signed a 3-year contract with Renaissance. They are aware of all the implications that I just said. And so they actually encouraged a 1-year contract. And really, this contract reflects just moving us forward for 1 more year, what we've been doing. The second piece is FastBridge. And FastBridge is around $5,000. We entered that partnership, or plan to enter that partnership as a possible replacement for Renaissance. Same company, but different than STAR. We would like to do 100 seats, and then that's what the plan is. And we have a plan to work with instructional coaches and title teachers to really play with that assessment and tool to learn more about it. So we're better prepared to make a decision in front of the spring. Those are the 2 invoices. They'll also be on the fiscal committee as well. There's some things different and new in the calendar, so I'll just go through the calendar pieces that are new and answer any questions you might have. And so on page 1, the assessment calendar, I think of the assessment calendar as not only a calendar, but a learning tool. So there's some pieces that are just really cut and paste from DPI about strategic assessment systems. And then defining what summative, we throw around these terms, right? But summative, interim, formative, and diagnostic, and what those are, just examples. So it's a learning tool. Top of page 2, on my page 2, I think there's a distinction that's noted that's important to note. Bold assessments are mandatory from a district lens, and the ones that are not bold and also listed as discretionary are really discretionary by teams, grade level teams, or by buildings. And that pops up a couple times here. And so if we look at 4K through 2, again, STAR is something that our teams are familiar with. So that's again, we don't want to overwhelm folks. And STAR will do that 3 times a year. The winter window, the second testing window is discretionary. We want folks to make a decision. If they're going to use the data and drive instruction and make decisions, they should use it. If not, that's okay if they have enough other data. We're going to continue with Hagerty. Hagerty was new last year. We have the 4 and 5K literacy. There's the winter window there is Ames Web Plus. That is the early literacy screener that the state told us we will use. So that will be used across the state. It starts in the winter. That's when we have to begin to use it, but we're already in discussions with our instructional coaches and a time calendar in September to learn more about it after the start of the year. And, pulling that off in the fall is probably unlikely, but if we're ready, we will do so. FP is a screener or a literacy, assessment that we've used in the past. We just again changed that to discretionary in each window. Again, school, grade level teams to make that decision. If that is data that they need and want to drive instruction, they will have that, at their discretion. Paired read is blank for now. It's something that we will talk about, with our admin team tomorrow and get some feedback. Grade 3, bottom of page 2 is really the same as, very similar to what we've done in the past. Other than making that star discretionary in the winter and F&P discretionary in all spots. Something new at the top of page 3 is literacy perspectives. That's student agency and identity conversation. So it's draft, a lot of work needs to occur before now or before then. But the idea is Chris and I will go to every elementary school and talk to students and how they see themselves as readers and writers. And the data that we gather there, we then share with every elementary principal. And so we have, Chris and I have worked to schedule 1 month or 30 minutes every month with individual principals to share some data. And so that'll just become our system. So we'll talk to, I think the vision here is to talk to 10 students at each of the elementaries and talk to them about, again, their views and their confidence as readers and writers. Grade 4 again is, the literacy math is very similar. You see math perspectives, same concept. Chris and I will talk to 4th grade students now and talk to them about their perspectives and confidence in mathematics. And that data will be gathered and brought to principals, for their leakage. Page 4, if we go to page 4, something new there is, it's been happening. But you see student, community, career, and college readiness, career exploration. We're just codifying the fact that the academic and career planning process really begins before high school, right? So we're already talking to students in elementary about what are you thinking about the future? What excites you? And so we're just calling that out. And I'm working with Sarah Tarpey to ensure that. Grade 6, it's not new, but you see IXL diagnostic. Last year was the first year at the middle level to use IXL, so now it's officially on the calendar. That partnership will continue. Here you see literacy again at the 6th grade. Same concept. Chris and I will talk to 6th grade students now about how they see themselves as readers and writers. We go to page 5. Again, IXL shows up at the 7th grade level. If we turn our attention to grade 8, you'll see pre-ACT 8-9. That is new. And so I believe Josh talked about at the last data meeting, his use of ACT data to set student goals and really understand where they can grow in the ACT suite. And so we're bringing the pre-ACT, the 8th grade level in the fall for a number of reasons. One, it'll give the 8th grade staff some data to really dig into that really connects through the high school. It also, not this year, but next, we'll have a freshman walk into the high school with being prepared to write goals on the ACT that connects for the rest of their high school career. It also aligns with some of the expectations of added at the middle school. There needs to be a pre-college assessment at the 8th grade level that has been lacking. So it checks a number of marks. The middle school is really excited about it, and so we're partnering with ACT. You see, bottom of page 5, IXL was piloted at the high school last year, and to keep that continuity and that piece in place, we're going to use IXL at the freshman and sophomore levels. and a little bit at the junior level as well for ISO. Page 6, community career college readiness, again, passion, skills, exploration, that's already in place, part of the academic career planning process. As well as grade 10, it's really asking our students to explore what they're interested in and develop kind of a plan to further explore that so they can be ready. Page 7, again, community college career readiness. Really just thinking about, and Sarah Tarpey is working with me to make sure this is realistic, but really thinking about at the junior level, one experience focused on community career and college readiness. So that could be things like school work, youth apprenticeship, dual credit, AP. And so the data is saying that our students at the junior level are hitting this already. And at the senior levels, we're saying we should have 2 of those. And again, this is already in place. We're just really codifying and systematizing. Bottom of that chart, grade 12, just see, we're saying we're gonna pilot this fast bridge piece. And we'll be early spring, be ready to say fast bridge star or something else. Which will put us in a less drafty spot in August next year. Next, access stamp and DLM are assessments that we are asked or told to give, and so those are just dates that we push forward. The bottom of page 7, again, we do a staff engagement survey, we're just listing that here. Top of page 8, we did some rounding last year, and we want to just put this on the list so our staff see this. This will be shared on our website across buildings, so folks are aware. Definitely drafting, but community pieces, we're thinking about really using a community rating as a marker to talk about what that means to our district and community. Thinking about a community engagement survey, and the directors will have a conversation at 9:30 today about this possibility. Having some town halls, really elevating the voices of our community in a spot that's really facilitated by us. And then think about parents and caregivers. We want to do an engagement survey with our parents and caregivers. And we would ask this last piece here, family engagement opportunities. We really asked our building leaders to think about how they engage family and what they can do differently or better. We'll have conversations throughout the year on that topic. What questions? Anything about the assessment calendar?
Committee members?
I do have a question.
Please.
I know, so at 8th grade, you're gonna have the career exploration for your goal plan. Will there be? I think it'd be important to continuing to reevaluate those goals. Is that part of the identity, the student agency, or I guess. I feel like there's something, like, once they get to high school, that's when they really need to be,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? 'Cause
Sarah Tarpey is our champion for the district for academic and career plan. And so I've had a number of conversations with her about what this looks like. I think there are pieces in place already around this, but there's definitely an opportunity to shore that up. And so she's working now to put together a middle school kind of ACP, academic career planning team. To talk about what that showing up will look like. And so you see that in 5th grade, these are just highlights, right?
Mhm.
We're gonna have the conversations every year, but we know at 5th grade, we really wanna start thinking about what interests you have. And then in 8th grade, be more systematic perhaps in those conversations, knowing that between 5th and 8th, the conversation will continue. But 8th grade, as you enter high school, are your courses aligned with what you're excited about or wanna learn more about? And so those are just kind of pulse checks on that work.
Lori, yeah, I was gonna say, Lori, would you, in 8th grade, it says career exploration and 4-year goal plan development. Should we also include that, Jason, and 9, 10, 11 plan revisit? I mean,
Yeah.
just to
I
put,
mean, it's no between 9th and 11th
Yeah.
grade, my son completely changed
Right.
what he wanted to do.
and it's not to say it's not
You
gonna be
know.
revisited, it's a question of should it be on the map in the spring of
That-
every
that I
year
think is-
to,
yeah.
to revisit the plan? Just to make sure that we don't look like we're setting
And
it in
then don't
stone,
look in at 11th grade and think that they're on the same track.
That's my-
because they
yeah,
most likely are
like
not.
adding a revisit,
Thank you.
just in there, if that captures it, Lori, I agree, that's.
Thank
And again,
Good
that is
addition.
happening, right?
Yeah.
These are just,
Right.
for me, like, these are, non-negotiable checkpoints,
Right.
knowing that those are happening. So
Mhm.
thank you for the feedback.
Committee members, excuse me, Dan, Lori, Sam,
I have a bunch, but if Dan wants to go first,
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
okay.
Thank you. The staff engagement survey, could you give me some typical questions that would be on that?
Not off the top of my head, we've done that same survey for at least 3 years, I believe.
It was just
It
revisited
was
at our
revisited.
last board meeting.
Yeah, and we changed it.
That's through HR, right?
Yeah.
And if you want, what we can do is I can have Margaret send those, survey questions back up to you guys.
All right, thank you.
If you want to review it.
We partner with school perceptions for that.
All right, with the assessment calendar, we have the discretionary tests. I like that it's discretionary because there's been commentary that we're over assessing kids. So I like that, hey, you know, if you need it, great, if not. But my question becomes, is there going to be some sort of consistency within the building, within, you know, grade level, whatever? Which leads to a second part, middle school literacy is discretionary across the board, all of 6, all of 7, all of 8. So teacher A is doing it 3 times a year, teacher B is not doing it at all. I know this is still drafty draft, so I'm not expecting an answer. It just leads to me to wonder what's going to happen down the road. And the other piece to that is if there is nothing required at the middle school level, what are we using then to check other than, I mean, I'm not saying that our district summative assessments aren't good, but what is it comparing against a norm of standards across the board? Because as we look at math, in the past, we didn't realize that our standards were a little off in terms of what we were teaching versus what should have been done. So I feel like we're losing a check and balance if we don't have something there. So just something to consider, not necessarily needing an answer at this point in time.
Yep.
Another thing is IXL. IXL looks to me like IXL is kind of moving toward, taking over for STAR, and I'm okay with that. Because IXL is being utilized. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we have a paid version of IXL, which I haven't implemented this diagnostic in 5 years, so it could be different than when I did it. But when you have the paid version, it takes the kids at their readiness level, here's where they are. And then there are pieces that come up in IXL for what they're ready to do and learn and take care of is based on that diagnostic. That diagnostic is what they knew at that point in time, but now you have instruction that's happened throughout the year. If you don't do another checkpoint in that, by the time these kids hit summer, they could be still here in IXL, but their readiness level has grown because of the instruction that's happened in class. So I'm just wondering if that needs to be looked at, especially, I mean, I'm assuming at summer school, they would do another diagnostic anyway to get them up and running for what they need, but something to consider moving forward. I don't think the way this is, that it's utilizing IXL to its utmost capacity, but it might be using it to the utmost of where we are right now. It's just there's room to grow in that. And then my last one, sorry, these are all comments,
Oh,
not
it's good.
questions. The last one is kind of a comment or a question. And that is when you look at STAR and you look at growth, districts either look at it from fall to fall to see where the growth has occurred or from spring to spring. And that's why the winter one isn't necessarily needed because you still have that full growth. Yet, when you look at 4K and 2 and grade 3, some of them are doing fall and winter, sometimes it's winter, spring, so, consistency wise. Are we okay with that? Do you understand my question? Because we're not consistent as, oh, we're measuring growth, how do you communicate that to parents? We're communicating fall to fall, spring to spring, because parents get these results also. So I've got a kid in kindergarten, second and sixth grade, and it could be different at all three. So how, just something, and again, I don't expect an answer right now, just something to consider thinking about.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback, and I would just say that, 4K to that band is the most drafty part of this piece, just because the timing of the announcement of Ames Web threw us for a little bit, it'd be ideal to say Ames Web, each window, and then think about how STAR might be used as a diagnostic only as needed or any other tool. So this calendar will look much different next year, I'm sure. But I appreciate your feedback, and we're gonna begin to have conversations with principals tomorrow. And we'll hopefully at least remove one of the drafts, like those three.
Does STAR have to be used 4K to 2 in the fall? Could you use Ames Web at all three just for consistency?
It could be,
And then literacy would start in grade 3 with STAR?
but again, Ames Web, and we're not prepared to execute it right now.
Got it.
And again, for that sanity.
Understand. Yep.
Yeah.
I
So that's
forgot about
where,
that, thank you.
they would say, let's
No,
put
thank
STAR here, It's not ideal.
Anything else from
It's a great
committee
first-
members?
Thank you for the great first.
Craig?
I have a few questions too, so I apologize in advance. By making the screeners optional, are we concerned about losing the longitudinal data? That I think that's kind of what, part of what Dan was asking. That'll be one. The other one would be, where there are two screeners that are offered, like in fourth grade and also in other grades too. Is the discretionary screener offered in conjunction with or in lieu of? So they're not taking two different screeners at the same time. But then the other comment I guess I would want to make would be, that I'd probably encourage more of a department level decision on whether or not this would be discretionary. Because what you probably don't want is, for students, like in Mrs. Clark didn't have to, her kids didn't have to take the STAR test, so I'm not gonna be taking the STAR test in Mrs. DeGrant's class. You know what I mean? You kind of want to, I don't know, just some of those thoughts and concern about it. You probably want to make sure that you have a valid screener.
I can speak to a little. Sure. So again, tomorrow, we'll dedicate a number of minutes to talking about the assessment calendar with principals. And to talk about what discretionary really is, right? It's the first time I think that this has popped up. And I totally agree that we don't want, if we're a third grade group, for me to be the assessor and you not do it, right? So some guide rails around what discretionary means, we will definitely talk about. I also think it's important to know that, or to state that these assessments, the literacy especially, are really, Desha, who is a wonderful instructional coach, reminds me often is that literacy is complex, right? Each of these assessments really are assessing a different complexity or component of literacy. And so I appreciate that reminder, right? Like, because I want to strip this assessment calendar down to bare bones. Jenny yelled at me, or Desha yelled at me, right? But it's really to try to capture where our students are as far as literacy, and that's a difficult task. And so I appreciate that, but those are the discussions that are continuing. Thank you.
And my final question, if I mean, is starting with third grade through graduation. We have on here, student agency and identity conversations. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, sure. Again, one of the things that Chris Malloy and I talk about often is how do we elevate the voice of our stakeholders, including students, staff, and parents. And so this is, we don't have a plan right now, other than it's on the calendar, we know we're gonna do it. But we picture, going to Douglas for a day and sitting with, I think, third grade is the first time it shows up. Really talking to 10 third grade students about how they view themselves as readers and writers. Do they like reading and writing? Are they good at reading and writing? And so it's something that we continue to formulate our plan. But that data will then be shared with principals. Did you know that, third grade group doesn't like reading? It's a small sample size, but I think it's powerful, again, to elevate the voice of our students and our parents and staff. That's just.
Is there like a formal curriculum or assessment that's associated with that particular topic, or is it just?
No, Chris and I will formulate some questions, I'd be happy to bring those questions here when we're ready. But it's a conversation with students about, again, how they see themselves.
It's just around the issues of staff. It's just a rounding check-in. But we're just gonna have a random group of kids in each grade level. At random. Hey, we wanna ask you some questions. Just as a pulse.
Put focus on some topic, and this topic is either math, literacy, or career readiness. I think hearing the voice of our students around those topics is important. It'll get messy. It won't be perfect the first time we do it. But I think hearing the voices of those students talk about those topics is powerful.
Okay,
Yeah, appreciate it.
Jason, Jenny, Sarah, Jared, other Ed Service members, this document was requested by Ed Service and put together by Dave Vitale probably 2 or 3 years ago. And it lists, all the assessment names as of that time. There was STAR, there was Fonda Snell, there was Wisconsin Forward, there's pre-ACT, and then there was the ACT. There, wasn't, on this one, there wasn't Hagerty listed. There wasn't the IXL or what is it, IXL. And, I'm not sure if there's other ones I'm missing, the ones we're gonna be approving or gonna be asked to approve. So, Jason, I asked that if you have this, if you don't, I'll give you my single and only copy, although I think it's available digitally. And I just asked that it dovetails very nicely into the calendar document you put together. But for reference, I'd like to see to make sure that there's definitions. I mean, I know you did a good job of grouping yours under summative, interim, and formative, which I don't think this one did quite as well. So I like that you put those topics in there, but if this needs to be modified, please do so and then make it a full document so that a reader knows in detail what STAR is and what forward is and what pre-ACT is compared to just having bullets on a piece of paper. So I'd ask you to merge those if possible.
Great, thank you.
And then the other thing, going back to a similar conversation with Dave at that time, and probably, I think you already said it, we are not under assessed. And your first bullet on here, I shouldn't say first bullet, with the least amount of testing. Okay, and it sounds like you got some pushback on that by maybe some people in the room. I'm okay with that, but it's really up to you and Chris, I would say, to determine what is the minimum amount of data that you can sample and come up with a conclusion as opposed to testing every part. You test a representative, number of parts. I don't care if you're, the Baldrige Award or you're Deming. You don't need to test everyone every time. And I think that just qualitatively we're over sampled. But at the same time, I can't tell you specifically how to reduce that amount. Because testing them is not necessarily as good as teaching them. And those are valuable minutes that we're losing by finding out how we're doing as opposed to assuming we're doing what we were doing last time and continuing that path. And so that's just a high level statement, but it sounds like you're aware of it and your statement in here actually includes it. So I just encourage you to push down that path of sometimes less is more.
I appreciate it, and, you know, I joke about Jenny and I are, she yelling at me, right? It's a fruitful conversation about how do we really be strategic long term. And I think it's important to note again, the impact of Act 20. That how that shows up in the calendar cannot be overstated, and the timeliness of it, right? And so this is, to me, like a transitional year in our assessment calendar, so thank you very much, appreciate it.
And then what would, can you frame the two, expenditures? And if I'm not mistaken, they don't have to go to fiscal. If we recommend them to the full board has to approve them. They're over 25,000, but they don't have to be reviewed at fiscal because Ed Services would push them to the full board for approval.
So stars, 27, rounding up, right, 27,000, it's for 1 year. Again, it's a part of that transition. Signed it, just saying, yep, we want to be interested, we haven't paid the bill, you know, it's over 20,000. Sarah, I talked to Sarah Duncan, told her that it'd be available at fiscal if need be. But if we want to push this forward, we'd love to move forward with that. Fastbridge is $5,000, and that's the one that we're kind of piloting and playing, so those are those two pieces, neither of those have been paid or invoiced, these are just, I have to sign it to keep the ball rolling.
So with this quote for Star, the school count is 8. But according to your plan, the high school is not using it. Is that school count correct? Is that the correct pricing?
Yeah.
I was just curious.
There's a small number of seats that we traditionally have purchased for the high school.
Okay.
I believe, special ed and EL department use it as needed, so we just wanted to roll
So
that
that-
forward. Yep,
Makes sense.
thank you for asking.
So question, I just accidentally clicked on the bottom of the calendar. There's the student identity and agency conversation guide.
Yep.
And it gives you links to surveys
Yep, those are just.
and the community career survey.
Yeah, that's that.
It's asking, do I tell the truth when it's not easy?
Yeah, that's, that needs to be unlinked, that is not the one we're gonna use,
Because this looks like a lot of Pandora.
it is not the one. It is, Sarah Tarky, Chris and I are working on a different version of it, so I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah. But you see what we're thinking, right? We're thinking about how do you see yourselves as readers and writers and as being prepared for career. So
Yeah, the survey doesn't really ask that.
that's not the one, yeah, I apologize.
Okay, is the committee good with the two quotes and recommending those for resolution? I would assume as one resolution as opposed to two, because technically one doesn't need one. It's only $5,000. Only one of them needs one, but we can lump them together into one. Is that good with the committee? Okay. Awesome.
All right.
Okay, anything else on that topic? And Jason, do you have this? I can.
I have it somewhere.
Okay,
Thank you.
and if you want to change that, this is not etched in stone. It's just a hard copy piece of paper that I carry with me that's got coffee stains on it for reference. So,
Let's be honest.
yeah.
You do.
I would forget literally everything about what Star is compared to Fondas and Pinell if I didn't have it with me.
It's a good resource.
So if it needs any changes, just please make it available and reissue as necessary along with the timeline.
So I'm gonna put an additional request to that. Can we share that out with the committee because we have 2 committee members that might.
Yeah, I don't know where, I don't even know where this, it used to reside in a, oh, what did Dave call that webpage? It was was it his Ed Services blog? And I don't know if it existed anywhere else. I don't know if that Ed Services blog has been sunsetted. I don't know if it still exists or if anybody's maintaining it. The one that Dave had, independent of the school districts. Yeah, that's what I
But
thought.
this
So,
would be something that could go into, we're starting that board member Google Drive.
oh, right,
Something there to access.
right.
That way, even if you're not a committee member, hey, what is it?
Yes,
Just
I-
easy.
yeah. I like that for whether it be board orientation or just public consumption. Obviously, they want to know what the test is. Hey, Mom, I took a STAR test today. Good. What is it?
And, as a side note, we'll send out some information starting in September to families. that gives that overview as well.
Okay.
We just think it's an opportunity that we missed last year, I missed last year. Of just communicating early and often to our parents, what is the access, what is the forward, so we have a chart that will go out starting September.
Okay,
I'll say this though, too, Jason, don't beat yourself up too much, the direction that we're heading, and the path, pathways that we've taken on over the last couple of years have been, leaps and bounds ahead of what we were doing, so just know that, don't beat yourself up on that. But we continue.
we'll let Jenny beat you up.
Yeah. let that be
Regular.
Yeah.
We need to move their offices.
I think you can, sure, honestly.
Okay.
Are you giving up yours?
Oh, sure, they can mine, I don't care.
I see a window for things to be thrown through.
Oh, things are thrown.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But now you have to get up to do it. You can do it from your seat if done.
It's part of the wellness program. Um, shifting gears,
Yep.
our next discussion is the panorama discussion. I know that that was on the full board. I just have a few remarks to start with. Essentially today, we hope to get some questions answered about how you would like us to move forward. I do want to share that, Sarah and I have spoken often and in depth about the fact that if the, either the committee doesn't want to move it forward to the board or the board doesn't move it forward, she is ready, willing, and able to embark on a process to determine, best next steps about how to measure these pieces. If you notice on the assessment calendar, it was intended determined, and so I do want you to know that we are ready, willing, and able to move forward in a different direction if that's the direction that either the committee or the board is wanting to move in. Today, my hope is that we know whether or not we are going to move the proposal forward to the full board. Whether or not you are interested, if that is the case, in moving forward to K-8 or a K-12 option. And also if you are choosing to move forward, whether it's an opt-in or opt-out process. I do know that, we intend and will maintain the same questions that we have used in the past, because I know there's been some question about what questions will they be. I will again point you to the district website that has those, posted. I know it does say sample form, but I can assure you these are the questions that we used. It's just when we go to PDF it, just like I marked things with draft, they mark it with sample form. I also know that, should the board decide to move forward, we will roll out a very comprehensive, communication plan to families. First about the assessment and then about, results and how the results are being used. I know that's been one area of concern. And then I know there were also some questions about data security and privacy, and I will just turn you to the quotes. Oops, let me see. I've got too many quotes open. If you look within the quotes, it does review specifically the data security and privacy and what happens upon termination with the data, because I know that that question was asked as well. So I will just turn you to that for those answers. So that being said, I will reiterate that Sarah, the student services team and administration are ready, willing, and able to move forward with determining a different plan if either Ed Services doesn't forward it to the board or if the board does not approve the implementation in the fall.
Okay, so I'm gonna say that I missed the last board meeting where there was a committee of the whole on this subject. So I'm not necessarily prepared to kick off the first comment or maybe even ask the first question. So for committee members present, who wants to go first on the topic of panorama and where the board left off and the decisions before us today? Go ahead, Sam.
At the committee of the whole, we discussed this quite a bit, and I did talk towards the end about how I was gonna look into some alternatives and do some more research, and that's what I've handed out to you guys, is some of my conclusions about that, as well as kind of a demonstration here. I don't think I gave you one of these earlier, Jared. You want?
Absolutely.
Yeah, oh, actually. Yeah. So yeah, so I started off with the conclusions that I had, with some of the alternatives that I looked into. I thought that would be the reasonable place to start, so people kind of see the bottom line there. What I found was that none of the survey service alternatives to Panorama are as robust as Panorama is. Panorama seems like it's kind of cornered the market there. I did look into 3 alternatives. There was SurveyMonkey.
Just a second, Sam, I think that, did you email it to Jenny?
Here, Jenny, let me, yeah, let
Cause
me,
I just got it in my inbox and I just wanna make sure she can share it on the screen
Oh,
while we're
yeah.
talking.
definitely,
Just so that the people who are participating online can reference the document.
definitely, yes, thank you.
Is it in my?
I think I just got a copy. If not, I can forward it.
Yeah, I think I just sent it to the board members, but I didn't get it. Yeah, if you want to just forward it.
Okay,
That one might have a few less slides than
Okay.
the ones that are in here, but it'll be fine either way. Nothing substantial is taken out,
Did you forward it? When did you forward this to us?
just this morning.
somewhat moments ago.
Is that word robust again, huh?
Hey, I've got it on my mind, you know, when I found out that it's the Latin equivalent of the word oak, I don't know, I like that. Sounds nice.
So you should be getting it or gotten it. Okay, thanks, Sam.
Yeah.
Continue.
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah, so, the 3 that I looked at were SurveyMonkey, Bright Bites, and Branching Minds. SurveyMonkey had some really strong, political bias that was fairly apparent when I looked through their, content on their website. And I think that that's probably not the best direction for the board and the district to move. Bright Bites did have less of that political inclination, but it wasn't really specialized for school purposes, so I didn't know if that would be the best option. Branching Minds, at least on its face, seemed the best. It seemed very neutral as far as worldview things go. And it was geared towards schools, so it seemed like that would be a quality alternative when I was looking at it initially. On further inspection, all of them did have some degree of that political leaning going on. But I think that that's that comes with the territory when it comes to these survey services, which started in 2012 or thereabouts. So some of the overarching issues that, with those alternatives that I saw were that you were probably gonna have to look pretty closely to see if there is a withholding of information about political bias. Pricing, like we talked about at some of the previous meetings, is likely going to be less favorable than Panorama because Panorama is recommended by DPI. And subjective surveying, regardless of what tool you use, even if we just use a Google Forms survey like the one that we looked at in the last section, it's still going to have that subjectivity, and that is to a certain degree going to be unreliable as far as drawing strong conclusions about the student body. So I thought it would be useful to kind of walk through a demonstration of some of those issues that arise, and Panorama is the best example of where you see that. So I wanted to go into the purpose of SEL in education and kind of how that plays out. So you can see that on the following slide I have there. I think it's it's that. SEL, it seeks to assess weaknesses in the student body as far as academics, education, and in social and emotional areas, and to provide a remedy for those weaknesses. And so I thought it was worthwhile to look into what exactly are the weaknesses it's trying to assess. And in doing so, I found out that there was a presentation given by DPI with Panorama in 2020, October of 2020, where they kind of outline why they think you should use Panorama for SEL. And they speak specifically about looking at SEL through an equity lens. And just so we're clear, there's equity can be used in a couple of different ways. Equity can mean allocating the proper amount of funds to the proper places so that a school runs smoothly. But in this case, as they make clear in their description, equity is really talking about racial, gender, and other identity class equities, as it says down below there. So that's where Panorama is coming from. And if you look at the toolkit that they give people, the playbook rather, they have a variety of resources, but I thought that a great one to just examine as a sample was Teaching Tolerance, teachingtolerance.org, which comes from the Southern Poverty Law Center. So when you go to teachingtolerance.org, the URL or website address actually changes to learningforjustice.org, which I have circled up there. Learning for Justice is a program of the Southern Poverty Law Center, as I said, and in their program goals page, they outline that it's to be a catalyst for racial justice, to dismantle white supremacy, to strengthen intersectional movements, and to center learning on action for liberation and justice. And they make it very clear that their goal is to make students think with a political activism mindset, very, very clearly in their program goals page. So then I have a couple of examples from the lesson plan. I took them from the kindergarten through second grade because I thought that would be useful. They're anti-bias education orientation. And at the top of the lesson plan examples, I just reposted that program goal there so we can remember kind of what they're talking about when they talk about these things. So they talk about challenging the text, uncovering assumptions and biases within the text for literary plans. And again, these are assumptions and biases that have to do with dismantling white supremacy, creating racial justice, intersectional movements, political activism. They also talk about resistant reading, where you refuse the ending of a book. You scrutinize the beliefs and attitudes in that book, and then you examine contradictions, gaps, silences. Again, this is all in aims of addressing those things. And then what really ties that together is they say in Cracking the Code, they explicitly say that they have students examine texts for bias related to race, gender, class, religion, age, and sexual orientation, among other identity categories. Again, this is for kindergartners through second grade. They're having them examine for biases for sexual orientation.
Sam,
So-
just a quick question, and I might have missed, how did we jump from, I'd see how you tied Panorama to DPI, in this slide.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah.
that's a presentation from the DPI.
Yes, this is a DPI and Panorama presented this.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
then how do we jump from them to Southern Poverty Law Center?
Yeah.
Where's the link or how does that resource tie to what the DPI in Panorama presented?
So on I believe this was the 33rd slide in their presentation, they talk about, when you use Panorama, you are able to access a playbook of resources in response to SEL results. So this is something that they provide you with. They provide and encourage
This
you
is
to
a
use.
DPI slide.
This is, DPI and Panorama, yes.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, and then I'm saying, let's go and look at.
Okay, so then you just, okay, that's your, okay, that's.
Yeah,
I just
thanks for
wanted to-
clarifying,
I wanted to make sure, I thought that's what, I was just trying to follow the bouncing ball, okay.
Yes, definitely. And this is kind of one of the recurring issues that we have here is, this is a pretty pervasive element of Panorama specifically, and the other survey options that I looked at have strong flavors of this as well, but they oftentimes don't bring it forward and make it apparent that this is where they're going. But you can see from these examples that I've given you that Panorama is saying, take the SEL surveys and then use this to address the issues that we analyze with the SEL surveys. They make it fairly clear that their goal is to promote a critical consciousness and a political activism in students as young as kindergarten. I think that's pretty strong. And then that's just one example. There's many other examples throughout that presentation, but that's not the end of the issues that I observed with Panorama as I've been looking into it. There's federal connections. The Merrick Garland is the head of the Department of Justice, and he in 2021 said he was going to discourage, identify, and prosecute parents. And the co-founder, president, board member of Panorama is Merrick Garland's son-in-law, Zan Tanner. I talked about this at the board meeting. I think it would be very unwise for us to do business with a company that's associated with a man who is going after parents who are pushing back against critical race theory being taught in schools. And then additionally, they have many more connections to CRT than just what we looked at. They used to provide webinars and other services, essays, things like that. This is a list of names of them. SEL is social justice, dismantling white supremacy within systems and self, how white supremacy lives in our schools, leading adult SEL to combat systemic racism and implicit bias in schools. Implicit bias being when you're racist, but you don't know it and it just automatically comes out of you. And then strategies for addressing racism with students and caring adults. So they did this very, very strongly in 2020, 2021. When news stories of this started to break, they wiped all of the information from their website. And the only way I was able to access the fact that they had been teaching this to people for multiple years was by using the Internet Archive. That kind of leads into the next slide, which is suspicious and concerning behavior. The fact that they minimize the available information on their specific stances and they remove evidence of their previous resources, it doesn't sit well with me. I think that they're not behaving in an honest way or with integrity when they do that. They're not standing by what they believe to be true, apparently, and they think that the best tack is to kind of fly under the radar. They also used, I thought, vague language concerning student and family privacy when I was looking into their privacy standards. They did say that they don't sell information for advertising purposes, but they always made sure to clarify with the clause for advertising purposes. I thought that was very odd. If you're not going to be giving student information to other people and to other organizations, it seems like it would be simpler to just make a broad statement. We do not give student information to other services. Instead, or to other organizations. Instead, they always clarify for advertising purposes. We do not sell or rent. And that seems oddly phrased to me, to say the least. And then last, and this is just kind of a throwaway, they promoted a collection of essays, a book called Teaching While the World is on Fire. And the lead essay is by a domestic terrorist who organized multiple bombing initiatives. Bill Ayers, he did lots of bombing back in the 60s and 70s, didn't kill anyone except for his own people, but people's deaths came from his organization. So I feel like Panorama has a lot of really unnerving connections, ties, and things that they promote. So my proposed solution at the end of that, and thanks for listening to me talk through all this, I tried to make it as compact as possible. I would say that because of those political affiliations, because of their suspicious behavior and the reams of problematic subject matter, we really should not be using Panorama as a survey system in the school. I do think that checking those alternative survey services may yield fruit. Although after looking at the kind of sample survey that you had in the last section, Jason, I think that maybe an alternative would be doing a Google form survey, depending on the kind of standards we can set in place to make sure that it's one survey per person and that it's linked to specific student accounts and things like that. That may be an option. But I think the biggest and best alternative would be to invest our efforts into building a strong understanding for the student body, the parents, and the school, an understanding of conduct and consequence in the district. I think that, like Dan has talked about it a couple of meetings now, is going to give us more bang for our buck than some of these subjective surveys. And especially when these subjective surveys are tied to all of the things that I just talked about. So that's my, not 2 cents, that's my $1.50, I guess, because it's a lot more than 2 cents, but I was trying to present it.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks.
And yeah, you did a good job of keeping that concise and on target and
Thank you.
hitting all the high points, so I appreciate that. One of my questions, and this has to do more with the administration of the Panorama tool, is that as I look at the dashboard, which is on our website, this is available, and you see that on the left, you have emotional regulation, learning strategies, self-efficacy, self-management, social awareness. What we don't have is teaching tolerance as a header. Were we able to screen that out, or is that something that, I mean, because we got to pick the questions, did we also get to pick the categories? Can we use the tool and avoid things that are more contentious? For example, if we're happy with the questions that you've seen or that we've seen, we have examples, and they're on the website that what do you want to call? And then we can mimic them potentially in Google Forms. I'm not saying it's not an option. It's more of an administrative, what else are you getting with the dashboard? Well, what else are you getting with the analytics that you don't get? Sam, you did a bunch of research on other tools and you called Panorama robust. Is there a way to get the part that we want and not get the part we don't want? We can a la carte the questions. Can we a la carte the reports? We can a la carte our resources for where we go to address what the reports say. If we scored a 74% in social awareness, we don't have to go to the Southern Poverty Law Center to address whatever that last teaching tolerance. Is that feasible? And I'm not trying to advocate for Panorama. I'm saying is that we have the tool, we've used the tool, we're quasi familiar with the tool. It was a 1-year run. There's some things that we find objectionable. If it takes us down a rabbit hole, we don't want to go down. So let's not go down that rabbit hole. Because rebuilding, whether in Google Forms or switching gears, is that going to set us further back from where we want to go? What's your, spin on that? Jared raised his hand. I'll let him go first.
First of all, I don't wanna take away from progress moving forward, but I think, for us to have progress moving forward, there's still some unanswered questions that I have as the administrator of the district to ascertain, what it is we're really here to talk about. We're talking about a tool on SEL, but, I don't know for sure that the board is comfortable with what we're talking about, at least administratively. When we talk about the need for SEL, surveys or assessments of whatever kind, because that's a survey is an assessment, right? And so I want to make sure I'm clear as to what our perceived needs are as an administration, because I agree with the last statement you said about, working on, consequences and those kind of, that's also needed, right? But that's not the only thing that's going to help us make better learners, right? And the keys to the SEL portion that I am very passionate about are things to deal with social skills. And what I mean by that, and I have a list of them, you can go online and look at them. But, we're talking about things like, cooperation, assertion of one's ideas, effective communication, conflict resolution, self-control, other executive functioning skills like organization, planning, those kinds of things. We don't have a really good way to assess those things. We have teacher observation, right? But we want to get better. And those things are necessary for the development of students to make sure that we continue to move us forward. A lot of times those were learned outside of school, in the home, in neighborhood conflict resolution, in my growing up, it happened a lot on the baseball field, right, on pickup games, right? And we had to help self-regulate and we had those learning opportunities. For whatever reason, we're seeing many of those opportunities being lost. A lot of kids being in organizations like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and other organizations. And I'm not saying that those are the holy grail. I'm just saying that those were opportunities outside of school and the school day, church groups and other things where students learn these things. The attendance in those has dramatically decreased, right? And so there are opportunities for learning, and there are opportunities also for us to see how effective that can be. It has declined. And so we're trying to pick that up in the schools to say, how do we understand that these skills, these very important skills that lead to productive learning are being had, right? What I'm desperately not wanting is to have some kind of socially training, whatever, like you talked about here. That is something that I think you guys know of me, that I am super aware of, also trying to make sure that is not what we do as a school, right? That is not what we're looking for when we talk about this. So I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page. Because if we're not on the same page and we don't think that these things are important, then we're talking about a tool that we may or may not use that it's not even worth the discussion, right? But if you think these things are important, finding a tool, the appropriate tool and the appropriate, ancillary things about lesson plans and other things, right, is important. And so the idea of having a tool and being able to go through the supports that come with that tool to say what's appropriate for use here, and what's not appropriate for use here is going to be the important thing that we're gonna have to have administration, direction from you and the administration to help, our staff sort out. But I just wanna know where our starting point is. So I'll open it up to that kind of conversation.
Craig, go ahead.
I guess my first question would be, is it the role of the district to fill a social void of organizations like Boy Scouts of America, Girl Scouts of America, and religious institutions that teach ethics, morality, and things of that nature?
Again, I shared with you, I don't think the school district should be teaching the ethics portion of that or anything else. But what has been missed by non-participation in those are other executive functioning skills and social skills, right? Development that has happened that we're seeing not happening in our students anymore, right? And we're trying to assess if these things are happening, like self-control, self-monitoring, paying attention, all of these things that you can see on the internet that are good things that lead towards learning and the ability to learn, right? Not the ability to morally think or ethically train. Again, that's the family, that's the church, right? That's other organizations' responsibilities as parents pick those organizations that they want their kids to attend. That's on them. But these other things that really lead to learning are us.
Diana?
My questions piggyback to that. There are four very overarching, I'm gonna blend them and however the conversation takes off from there, right? The first one is if Panorama is not supported by the board, we choose not to move forward with it. What will be used as the alternative at all grade levels to ensure that these needs are being met? And I'm glad you listed those out, so I don't have to. That was one of my first questions. My second was if this is a need in the district and Panorama fills that, is it needed by all levels? Because we've talked K-12, but then it was, well, maybe we just do K-8. Well, if it's not needed by all levels, if it's only important K-5, what are we doing 6-8 to meet those needs? And is that good enough to do K-5? We've got a couple different things kind of going on. And then my last one is what would be used instead of Panorama? So to meet the needs of the, I'll say it's the playbook, whatever those things to meet the executive functioning, the social skills, those things. You all know I haven't been in the classroom in 5 years, but if you look at since the pandemic and even before that, there's been a withdrawal of kids in terms of their participation in external kinds of things. You can look at the sports teams in Watertown in themselves, the attendance has gone down significantly. You can look at attendance in things, whether it be 4-H, Boy Scouts, you know, some of those things. Kids are opting more for their video games, they're opting more to stay home, their connection is different. And so what we had, sorry, I'm on my soapbox right now, but what we had when we were younger is different than what it is now. And so those social skills that they might have gotten through Boy Scouts, you know, those kinds of things that were there, that were more heavily involved, there's a withdrawal from that. And somewhere that needs to be provided for all kids. I've been subbing in the schools and lining up after lunch, acting appropriately at lunchtime. There's a significant change in the last 5 years. So I understand the push and the talk for academics. But there's also a different need. Why do you think in kindergarten, we sit crisscross applesauce, keep your hands to yourself? You know, asking to put, those are things that happen, yet I've seen, and again, I'm only in a parochial school, so it's not a total fair, but if I'm seeing it in the parochial schools, you know it's gotta be at the public schools as well. It's a very different, I'll call it decibel level, across the board. So I'm not saying we have to go with Panorama. My question to the committee is, if not this, then what?
And I'm gonna jump right to, I'm gonna say Sarah
Yeah.
on this, because it sounds like you and Jenny had a conversation on this. It can, I don't wanna say specifically answer Diana's question, but based off of your conversations that you've had, what have you, I presume they dealt with a lot of Diana's questions, because she also forwarded those to Jenny ahead of time, thank you. So you had them available to answer, so, why don't you fire away?
We didn't yell at each other.
Yeah,
to
oh, that's
be
only
clear. That's
Jason's.
just Jason and I yelling at each
Oh,
other.
only Jason gets that favor.
We don't. It directly addresses what you're talking about. So you're talking about students, let's just do the example of lining up after recess, right? Getting back to some of the basics. So what you guys have been talking about, right? While this survey or any survey might get back to how students feel about something or how they feel about themselves. What you're talking about is crafting a systemic way of teaching explicitly behaviors that are the expected behaviors, right? So it comes back to how are we doing the first 6 weeks of school, which is very responsive classroom, okay? And how are we then modeling, reteaching, doing our mini lessons, which back in the day of PBIS, those were called cool tools, right? And then there were the mini lessons. And how are we doing that based on data? So what I've been working with our principals on are creating, and Riverside still has theirs, but making sure that we are creating our behavior teams. They can call it anything they want to call it, but we are looking at our data and then we are being responsive to our data, but we are also being proactive. So the first week of school, we're working on classroom expectations. The second week of school, we're working on hallway and bathroom expectations, lunch, you know, and we do that very systemically. So that students know what it looks like, sounds like, and feels like to have appropriate behavior in a school setting, because it's very different than being at the mall or being at home or being at church or being anywhere else, right? If students knew, they would do. And so we have to make sure that we're teaching those modeling behaviors. Where this comes in, Panorama, and I wasn't here when it was chosen, I don't know the, you know, the precipitating factors to why it was chosen. However, is this something that Jenny and I, you know, want to die on a hill for? No, we can find different ways to work with our students in tier 2 and tier 3 with our school counselors and with our social workers if it comes to that, which is what we do already. How students feel about their belonging in a school is absolutely reflected in their behavior. When students feel that they belong in an environment and that they are part of that family in their classrooms, we know they learn better because they behave better as well. And so some of that is just coming down to those responsive classroom techniques. In the middle school, I know Josh Barnett and I have been having conversations. I just talked with Jason and Mike Cunningham yesterday about this. Josh and I have talked about this. How are we building in that community and that climate within our classrooms so that our students feel they belong there, they are learning, but we are also addressing all of those behaviors that lead to losing out in academics, right? It comes back to our students and their academic growth and achievement. Let's get through all of those things. Let's teach them what to do. Let's reteach them what to do. Let's support them so that they can learn. I think that addresses some of the questions.
Did we have that last year?
No.
Okay, so this is something that has grown. So I'm looking at, we were Panorama last year. An advancement that, I don't want to say Panorama has led us to, but we've evolved, I guess is the word.
Well, I think that, you know, you learn and you grow as you see how things change, right? And, you know, last year was my first year here, and so it gave me an opportunity to observe and to take a look at where some really great celebrations are and where some really great opportunities for growth are. And the pendulum swings. So sometimes things are going really well, and sometimes we need to just adjust our course a little bit to meet the needs of whatever needs to be done, and it's just one of those adjustments.
Thank you, Craig. I'll come back to you in a second. Lori or Dan, any comments at this time? We're not done. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak up. Okay, thanks. Sam, in your, I'm gonna say your analysis, your review, if Panorama is not the tool, and you mentioned 2 or 3 others, have you concluded that there's any that we should, or the district should dig into further as opposed to self-building one from Google survey? Or was there one that seemed to start to separate itself as far as something that we could investigate?
So Panorama, being high profile, has a lot of information that is more easily accessible about what it does, about what it provides. So I was able to pull a lot of information very comparatively easily, not from them themselves, but from other sources. The issue with the other 3 that I mentioned and other ones that I looked into as well is that information is less forthcoming. So I think that either Branching Minds or Bright Bites seemed much less contentious, but as I said before, there are still signs of this going on. And financially speaking, or fiscally speaking, I don't know, finance, economics, fiscal, I'm not sure which word to use there. In terms of how much it's gonna cost, I think it would probably be more cost effective for us to just create our own stuff. I think a lot of the cost that goes into this is so that they can promote a lot of these things that people in our community don't want to have promoted to their district or to their students.
Understood. And then I'm gonna ask Jason and maybe Jared to self-build surveys, administer them, and then harvest the data for Chris. Is that something we have? The skill sets, the time, and I'll say cost effective. If Sam is correct, that we're gonna spend 10,000 or 18,000, maybe 30,000 if we switch to a different program, or maybe only 5. But comparatively, for us to build something that harvested the data and we could administer on our own, and we could control the questions, and with Sarah's guidance or everybody's involvement at the teams, also dictate how we respond to that information, and we can use our own best practices that are directed more internally as opposed to externally. Is that even reasonable, or are we still gonna be looking for a third-party partner on this? And Jared, I'm gonna get back to your very first question in a second here. But do we have the competency and the time and the money to do that internally if we feel it's valid? If we move away from Panorama, it goes back to Dinah's question, what's the alternative?
So my response to that over time has always been, we probably have the resources to do that. We don't have the resources to do everything.
No.
So I mean, if that's what we want to do, is to invest time, effort, energy, and resources to do that, and do that in a way that gets to a level of efficacy that we think internally is good. It is going to be a journey, and it's one that if it's important, we will enter in, and if that's what we have available to us, that's what we'll do.
Okay.
The problematic piece of it still remains that it's what we do, and it's what we do internally. It has no check out there to see, like, how do these, the development and the assessment of these skills align to what other people in best practice are saying are where you should be, right? So we don't have an external check. It'll be only us. We'll be operating within a cocoon, right?
And the DPI or CISAs may or may not have resources, but so are many different books and many different, development.
We use Bright Bites or some other tool, right, that has been out there, created, tested, right? And we're in that, and we say, here's the question sets we use from that survey or whatever else. We can still compare our data to other data sets that are out there. We can't do that if we do our internal organization.
Okay, thanks. Lori?
I think the only thing I would add, thank you, Sarah, because I think that kind of, and I know when we talked about SEL at the meeting before, one of the things I had asked is, what are our goals? And I think when you look up there, that can mean so many different things at so many different levels for so many different students. And I think that's where I get a little lost in the translation, because I can only speak for my child as a parent. And I know where his downfalls are, but I also know, you know, do you get what I'm saying? Like, I think if we don't know what it is that we need or what we want to do and goals, if we're talking about discipline, there's a lot of things that we could be doing differently just in discipline. That doesn't mean we have to do all these other, you know, it could be a us thing. Are we doing the right practices for discipline? Maybe we need to change some stuff. So I just think we need to really evaluate the SEL and what our goals are before we even continue trying to fix it when we don't have any goals on what we're trying to fix. Does that make sense? Because when I looked at DPI and any of those other resources, there's a lot of things that I don't like, but the number one thing it said is you have to have goals. And I asked if we have goals, and we have no goals.
Okay.
So I
So,
think we're kind
and-
of going backwards.
And I
That's
wanna,
my opinion.
to some degree, answer Jared's question, which Craig, you asked, and I'll give my input on that. You know, if it's not the church, if it's not 4-H, if it's not, backyard play, baseball, if they're not learning to self-regulate. I don't wanna say adapt, I don't even wanna say meet the child where they are, but 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, Dave, you were there with me, 3D printers in STEM was a $20,000 expense on Jesse Domer's, Vision 2020, it was around 2015. Well, they did cost $20,000 and now they only cost like $500. The point is, the district pivoted. We saw that was a need that our students were going to have, whether it was to understand 3D printers. And if we identify a need in society, whether it's because of what they come in with or what they have to leave with, it's the district's has the opportunity to absorb that and say, you know what, that's a new thing out there that we have to start teaching our kids about 3D printing. And so we did it. And Jesse did it because he was on the, I don't want to call it the cutting edge, but he saw that it was a need. In the same sense, you cannot plant a seed in infertile soil. If the kids are coming in and they're not prepared to pay attention or to cue or to sit in one place for an extended period of time, you can't teach them. And if we're going to continue to hold our staff and our teachers accountable to teach our kids, then where do we meet these kids in order to continue to hold our teachers accountable? I'd love to hold the parents accountable, but last time I checked, nobody gives me that purview, nor anybody else in the room to hold another parent accountable. In fact, we get a lot of letters saying, stay out of our discipline and our raising of our children. And I would venture to guess that that's a significant portion of the parents. So that means you have to work with the product you're given, which means if it requires a little fertilizer before you plant the seed, then let's spend some time on a little fertilizer before we plant the seed. And maybe on the back end, 3D printing and going that direction sounds like a great idea because that's education. And on the front end, we're a little bit uncomfortable with it because it's not quite something you learn in a textbook, but it still produces the outcome that we're looking for. And that is students who are, or I get it's not exactly yet in the mission statement or the vision statement, but let's just say, you know, educated, contributing citizens. And that's still our ultimate goal. So if we have to, Jared, my answer to your question, do we have to dip our toe in the SEL waters? We do, if we need fertile soil to plant the seed in. Otherwise, we're gonna fail. Let's see, Craig, I think you were up first.
Yeah, I guess I take an issue with, I feel like Panorama is just a panacea, just in general. And, I take issue with outside organizations like DPI telling us where we need to be when it comes to social emotional learning. When we get into the nitty gritty of social emotional learning, that's where ideologies and something that can be very harmful can creep in. According to whose ideologies are best suited for teaching these kids? Really, that's the discussion that needs to be had, if that's the road we're gonna go down. So when it comes to PBS at the middle school, for instance, there was such a huge push, more so board approved or board codified, I don't know how you would indicate that, but for restorative circles, restorative classroom, restorative justice, and now, you know, personally, I'd rather see, a greater emphasis on tools like PBS and Love and Logic being used. Because I fail to see how a survey is going to be the magic solution, to repairing demonstrated and actionable discipline. Because if that's what we're after, that's really what we need to be focusing on. Those soft skills, those demonstrated behaviors that we can correct. And a survey isn't going to fix that.
Sam?
Yeah, so 2 points. In line with what Craig was saying, I do think that we shouldn't be so quick to conclude that conclusions have been made in a solid sense. I think that the jury is still out on the efficacy of SEL programs. I think it's way far out, like so far out that it's going to Woodstock. But I think that the way that companies like Panorama and other special interest groups who personally benefit, the way that they would like to present it is that, oh, the science is settled, the data is there. I don't think it's as solid as it seems. And I think the fact that they push a very subjective data set is indicative of the fact that they don't necessarily take as strong a view of data as I want to. Secondly, yeah, I also agree with the other thing that Craig said. I think that ultimately the relationship between the school is one where the family has the opportunity to provide their child with greater opportunities in life. But in order to do so, their child must be prepared to engage in a civilized and formal environment, right? So when we're talking about these soft skills, that is the responsibility of the parent to prepare their child for that environment. The school's responsibility is not to raise the child or prepare the child. The school's responsibility is to hold standards so that that child can succeed and go on to do productive and great things with their life in society. And I think that saying, oh, like, don't worry about it, we're going to teach it at school is just going to worsen the problem in the long run, because it's going to create an environment where people go, I don't have to teach my kid how to do this. I don't have to teach my kid how to do that. They're just going to go to school, and it minimizes the role that a parent plays in their child's life. Not intentionally. I'm certainly not saying I think anyone on this board or in this room wants to do that, but I think that that's the long-term effect. It's like if you spent years in space, your bones and your muscles would start to atrophy from a lack of regular use under gravity. I think that actually the weight of responsibility there is really important for keeping a society good. This is a really broad philosophical conversation, but that's what comes along with really broad reaching and vague subjective surveys like Panorama, is like, what is the purpose of school? Things like that.
Dan?
First of all, Sam, thank you for doing all this work. It's terrific and the way you organize it. One correction though, 3 of Bill Ayers' acolytes killed a research student at University of Wisconsin when they bombed a mass research center. I really like what I'm hearing around the circle here, and I agree with David and Jared that we do need something. And I like the idea that we would generate those survey questions, because nobody voted for Panorama except 9 people. But they voted for each of the 9 here, the district did. And so if we created our own survey, they have somebody to answer to. And I also agree that we need to see how this is implemented by teachers. The client is the teacher, not the parents, not the families. And I agree the value should come from the families and so forth. But we need to see how this is being used in the classroom, because we've had some problems in the past and had to let teachers go because they were taking their students to Washington to a protest at a president's inauguration. And even commented on Facebook that maybe we'll even get arrested. Thankfully, that teacher was let go, but that's happening. And so we need to go back, look backwards and see, okay, we've got a good survey, how is it being used? And if it's, the final result is getting to the Southern Poverty Law, that's not good. If we have it here and the bottom line is, we've created, then we can get those calls and those letters to the board.
Thanks, Dan. Jenny, just let me know, Fred has his hand up. Fred?
Thanks, David. I hope everybody can hear me. Good conversation all around. I appreciate everyone's thoughts on this. One thing that stuck out to me as we look at this is we keep talking about tool, and I appreciate Sam providing different opportunities or different options and things there. Panorama is, we're looking at this as a tool. Like any other tool, I'm looking at, a hammer can be used to fix things. It can be used to break things. I think the same thing we need to look at is the agency of our district and of our administration to use the tool to the best for our district. I don't fall either way on for or against Panorama. What I'm looking for is what is the best tool from a fiscal perspective and to get them the results they need. If that is Panorama and they think they can use it and they can steer clear of any of the issues that we're talking about here because Panorama provides them the reports and things that they can't get anywhere else, fine. If it's SurveyMonkey and Google, there are reasons why you want to support or not support all companies. And what I'm saying is that we need to look at this as a tool. If we can't use it, and if we feel that there is undue pressure from the company when we use a tool, maybe that's the tool we don't use. But again, I don't want to take away the fact that we have agency as for our administration to use these tools the best fit for our district. And we should hold the administration accountable for the way we're using the tools. We can't hold the tool accountable because that'll be just the same as we can use for any other tool. As I'll point out, when we were using Zoom in the HR committee meeting and people were using Zoom to Zoom bomb us. Again, does that mean we need to go away from Zoom? No. This is the whole point of this is look at the tool. If we can use this, we can steer clear of the issues, fine. If we can't, then we should look at a different tool. This is my only point here. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Fred. And I'm gonna go ahead, Diane, otherwise I'll say, try to wrap it up, but I may not be successful. Go ahead, Diane.
Three pieces. The first, we've talked about the survey part of this. That's one component. We've talked about the playbook, the tools that go along with it. And we talked about those separately and then we merged them. So we're doing a lot of this. I appreciate all of the effort. There's things that open my eyes to some additional things. There's opened my mind to some questions as well. Does SurveyMonkey, as one of your alternatives, provide the tools, that playbook toolbox? Does Brightbytes? I haven't had time to dig in and look because it just appeared in my inbox now. So I haven't had time, so I'm asking those general questions. If we say we need or we want a survey of some sort to gather the data and a playbook or some sort of tools to help with that, two parts and pieces. Which of these alternatives provides that? Does SurveyMonkey, does Brightbytes, does Branching Minds? The follow-up, and I don't know these answers, I'm just posing it out there. When the admin team came to us with a proposal for Panorama, Brightbytes was one that you had on there. Have we had conversation with that group to see why Brightbytes was or was not considered at that point in time? As opposed to kind of going through all this again, maybe there were things in there, they were lacking this or that, or maybe that was a really close race. I don't know. But I do know that if we try to create our own sort of tools, survey, those questions are kind of easy. But the tools part of it, we talk about resources, money. What about the bandwidth? We have a referendum, we have a strategic plan, we're redoing our whole policy stuff with Neola. We're already pretty thin. So as we look to move forward, who are we asking this of? And understanding the amount of time in a day from talking to the different administrators that I've talked to, I know their schedules are pretty full and stuff is very heavy on their plates right now. So what are we gonna ask them to take off so that this can come forward? So just, I'm always thinking of the teachers, the staff in that as well. STAR and IXL have a diagnostic kind of thing, that survey, they're given fall and spring. And then you have months that you use that assessment, that survey, that whatever it is, to help bridge those lagging skills, if I use the term lagging skills. So I don't like the fact that we only do the survey once or twice a year, there's gotta be other things. But I agree, what goals, what are we doing with it, how are we doing? There's a lot of improvement that needs to come, and I said this at the last 2 meetings. We put our toe in the water, where do we go from there? Do we want, are we saying that, hey, I don't like this water, so we need to get out of it? Or are we not far enough into the water to make a decision? But if we go to a different pool, for lack of a better analogy, do we have the bandwidth to be able to create all that we need?
Okay. I'm gonna say any new information. Not just, I don't want reiterated thoughts on the same subjects. Well, we've already heard people's opinions. Saying it again is only gonna take another half hour. Is there new? We can continue to talk. It's fine. I don't have to go back to my office. Okay. Craig, go ahead.
No, the comment was made that this is to be used as a tool, and that we are supposed to be holding our administration accountable for staying on a particular path with that particular tool, something that just, but I think it's very different when the tool itself is geared toward and stacked for the most fundamental bias of instilling ideologies. And that I feel is harmful and destructive to the fabric of our society. And that is Panorama. I think that's been demonstrated very well today. So I don't.
I'm gonna say I 100% disagree with you, Craig. That's fine. I see nothing whatsoever you can find on their current webpage, and I'm not saying that in the deeper webs that you're not right, Sam, but the installation of any type of ideology is missing from anything that we've seen on the surface. I'm not saying that any tool, as Fred properly pointed out, can be misused, but I'm looking at it from a bandwidth, I'm looking at it from an efficacy, I'm looking at it from is it fiscally responsible? Does it get us to fix the problems that we're seeing? I would not whitewash this as a, dark state effort. I just don't see it. I'm not saying it.
I never said that.
Well, I forget the words you used exactly, but I don't view it that way. I'm not saying I'm in favor of Panorama. I'm just saying is that I don't believe that it's a dark tool that we've been, a Trojan horse that's been dropped into our district. I just don't see it. But once again, as Fred pointed out, it's the agency. It's our responsibility to use the information. We don't have to follow DPI. We don't have to follow Southern poverty law. It's just, we're not suckers.
Yeah, if I may just add to that, and this is where I started my conversation, which is the more that we understand from you, the elected people who govern the school district, right? What it is that you think is important. And I listed some things that I said administration thinks is very important that we look at, right? Going back to your agency as elected board members to tell us what we need to focus on and teach. Having administration bring to you what our thoughts are and issues that we're seeing. And tools like this or others that we can try to use to get to that. Is what the uniqueness of our system is about, right? Madison may choose to do it differently. Their board is elected to do whatever they want to do, and we're certainly not Madison. And not this community, not that I know of. However, when we talk about what is ours and what isn't ours, that's your job. Because when public education started in the 1800s, and it's this in our nation, right? That was the government's idea that we do have to step in and start teaching these things. That used to be this only those families and those families who could do it, right, for their children. Right? In our nation, we've decided, no, there are certain things that we as a public want to instill in our students. If you want to instill things like organization, planning, working measures, monitoring, these kinds of things. I'm telling you that we're lacking a way to make sure that we understand exactly where they are in the development of those things. And we need to start using some kind of tools to get there, whether they're self-created, whether there's something we purchase out there or whatever. And there are bandwidth issues and there are discussion points, but we need to start with what do you want? Right? And to make sure that we understand and define that so that our public understands what we do here, because I don't want people thinking that we're doing some of the things that you're worried about, Craig, which is having some alternate tool decide what it is we're teaching versus what we're teaching. Right?
Okay, Jared, I have one comment and then I'm gonna ask for a poll. First of all, I'm just gonna say that probably first of all, great conversation. Appreciate everybody's respect for each other and bringing up a lot of different points. I will say that still the most interesting thing I heard wasn't in today's meeting. It was actually something Diana said last time. And even before SEL was a topic, even before surveying, when you were a teacher, you indicated that you used to ask how your kids are doing and are they ready to learn? And that was at the last Ed Services meeting. And this is an effort to try to expand that, but that doesn't mean you can't just go back to that and make it very personalized between the teacher and the student, because that's ultimately who's in the room with the student trying to gauge if they're ready to learn. And so I love that I heard that Diana said that she used to do that, and you were a very good teacher, I'm sure. Just one, I guess it's just an editorial. So thanks for bringing it up last time. As far as this one goes, I'm interested in asking what we want to do with the resolutions. And I definitely don't hear broad support to put them on the agenda for approval. However, and I'm glad if Fred is still on, and there still is always an uncomfort level for me that if a subcommittee chooses not to put forth a motion that is a de facto vote to not allow the other 5 board members who are not board members to weigh in on it. In which case, Lori, I brought this up last time. I still believe it's our responsibility to make a recommendation to or not to approve it, but then still leave the resolution on the agenda so that it can be voted down or in favor of by the full board. By doing it alternatively, you are actually gutting the ability of other board members to weigh in on a subject. By deciding in committee, which committees don't have the authority to decide. So that's the way that I read it. I'm not, and I want to
Is
just.
that how we as a board have decided to do everything? I mean, my understanding is there are things that don't go as a resolution. So I just want to be clear that we're always,
That's,
I don't know.
if fiscal, for example, decided not to pursue something and it's
Right.
only 4 people, but the other 5 people didn't weigh in, they're making a decision and there are only 4 people making the decision.
No.
So,
Are you asking if there's precedent for that?
yeah.
Well,
And
right.
I'd
I'm
like,
not saying it's one or the other. I just think as
Yeah.
a board, we haven't really.
I don't know, Fred, what, I mean, if a committee.
So this is,
Yeah.
the committees cannot take board action. And David is correct in saying that by killing a killing this before, and I'm struggling with the word here, before it goes up to the full board, you're taking board action. What the committee does is do the research and make a recommendation. Put this up, this should go up in front of the full board, and then the committee's recommendation is to not follow through with it. And then present the information that was provided to the committee and not follow through with it. Then the full board takes the action to vote on it, vote it down or up, and then allows all the board members to have their say on it and make the action. Now, by the committee saying we're not going to go forward, we don't recommend going forward with it. Chances are the rest of the board members are going to go. The committee did the work on this. They understand this. I'm going to go with what they've recommended. but we still have to have this in front of the board. I held off on this up to this point because we were still in the midst of discussion on this. I think we've kind of come full around and finished up our discussion on this. So I would expect we should have this on the August board agenda.
And that's the direction I was leaning, Fred. The alternative, Lori, would be is that we make a recommendation for no resolution, and anybody at that time, because it's in the minutes, could be brought up as a resolution on the spot and say, you know what, despite what the committee recommends, I'd like to see a resolution, and then it comes on during the process of the board meeting. But I really believe that the board should have
That's more messy.
that's more messy. I'd rather have a recommendation, and, okay, so one, if Fred's in agreement and you're all in agreement, the resolution goes on. And it's gonna be for the approval of one and or the other of the two adoptions. And then there's gonna be a vote at the full board on the resolution.
I guess my question, Karen, I've seen in the board meetings when a resolution, I have heard board members say, I assume that the committee, they have sent it to the board. I trust that they, meaning those 4 people, felt that it should be here. And so I don't know where that, do you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying there's always this presumption that the committee has made this recommendation.
That's
And I just
true.
want to be sure that,
Yeah.
do you get what
I'd
I'm
say that,
saying?
But that's honestly where, as a board, you need to be clearer with,
Right,
the
right.
direction of communication. Having the resolution on,
Right,
right, doesn't mean that the committee supports that. It just means this is business we have to take care of.
sure.
Right.
If you in your minutes say, the committee does not, approve of this resolution for these reasons,
Mhm.
we're informing you as a board. The board can read those, right?
Yeah.
Each board member can make their own decision, and we can take the business that needs to be taken based on their vote.
Mhm.
Whether that's supporting the committee or not supporting the committee or whatever.
Right.
That's how a good functioning board works, is that they share from the committee
Mhm.
the discussion points and or whether or not they're leaning one way or another on whatever topic of business that comes forward. It is a topic of business.
Sure. I'm not saying it shouldn't go to the board. I just think there's been some unclearness
Yeah, it's-
on.
Having a
the
negative,
system
having a
procedure.
negative action as a resolution is uncommon.
Right,
But this one
Right.
particularly, we're not picking between a Ford and a Ram. Or a Dodge or whatever you wanna
No,
call
I
it.
agree.
So
I just know, I mean, this was a while ago where it came to the board as a recommendation from the committee when the committee had not recommended it. So
good,
I just don't want there
Yeah.
to be any kind of,
got it.
But I think we've come a long
I mean,
way
those things
in
matter.
terms of where our minutes have been,
sure,
in terms of discussion, because I know when I first joined the board, yeah, it was hash on committee, and if it made it to full board, unless someone specifically said this was not supported, you knew it had kind of the approval. We've evolved since then. There's been a lot more discussion,
Mhm.
with each of the sets of minutes, but I agree that there needs to be something stated, so there's no assumption out there
exactly.
that this has.
Because I
been
can imagine getting a lot of calls and emails that,
Right.
Good point.
Is there
I-
something
I'm
we can
sorry,
put
I'm
in the
just
board
gonna
doc?
be honest.
And that's what, I was gonna say is that in the minutes.
In the minutes. it would
In the
get-
minutes are gonna have to be in there, but you're right. If we put the resolution on there, there's gonna be could be a dozen people who are gonna stand up and tell us that they don't want us to approve it. And my next question is what do we all want the minutes to
Right,
reflect
right.
right now? And I'm gonna say Lori, Sam and Diana, as what did Tony would always do is say, well, I'm reading the room as it does not have broad support from the board, in which case the minutes should reflect as such. And then looking for alternatives.
that's all I was
Yeah.
trying to get.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm not saying
Very
it's
important
the full board.
to clarify too, this recommendation, right, came from administration,
Mhm.
right? It's not coming out of a committee, it's not, going from the administration to the committee codifying it. One of the important things about that, right, is when we bring an administrative recommendation to you, remember that we've done a lot of study, a lot of discussion points about whatever tool or whatever. And we're bringing some staff voice to that, right? That says some staff or the staff that we're utilizing this feel it's important, right? Or at least the majority of them. We're bringing them that. So for you to not have it go anywhere, It really, it said, it doesn't have a codifying notion to it.
Lori, what I think we're gonna do, if everybody's okay, let's write the resolution as a negative. That the
Yes.
resolution is to not renew Panorama. And that means an affirmative vote on the resolution is a non-renewal of Panorama. If it's worded that way, one, we don't have to pick between two because more or less. And I just wanted in full disclosure, public comment and all 9 members to weigh in.
Mhm.
So I do not want to do this in committee and then make anybody who's not currently present feel like they don't have a vote. Nor do I want there to be ambiguity in what the recommendation of the committee is. So if we word the resolution as a non-renewal and we vote on it 7-2, 9-0, 4-5, at least we'll have very clear direction from the full board as to its renewal. Does that seem reasonable? Does that assist
Yeah,
in
is
trying
that-
to set the expectations for
Can you
the?
guys move forward with that, or would you need it to be
Go ahead.
approved?
My suggestion would be, in reading the room, that there is interest in engaging in a process to determine what the best tool might be for this. So if we want to have it in negative toward the Panorama, but supportive of a research study process in which we are examining our data collection as it relates to social emotional learning through a year-long process, then that gives
I would-
us as administration direction as to what the board would like us to do.
I would leave that, can we just leave that and then can that be left in the minutes and just leave the resolution to Panorama? I mean, Ed Services has the ability to,
But that would be then an action step.
How clear do you want your actions to be for the staff to understand?
well, I do not want this to be a this should not be a referendum on SEL. Okay, this is a referendum on Panorama, and that's it. Okay, that's what's on our discussion today. That's what the resolution is. So I don't want it to start to think that we're not gonna be finding out what our kids need in order to be successful. We haven't voted on that and barely even touched on that subject today.
That requires like a whole separate meeting to talk about.
Precisely, precisely.
But
So,
then- But then our minutes should reflect, if your intent as a committee, right, is for us to study something else, because we do think that some of these things are important and trying to find a way to assess them is important, then we need to denote that as action from the committee given to the administration.
okay, and you want that in the minutes or you want that as a resolution?
No, you can't make a resolution from the committee standpoint. What Jen was
I'm saying, right.
suggesting is it'd be a resolution to
Okay.
take to the board. To see if.
Can- As this,
Fred, go ahead.
as this resolution was brought forth. to
Okay,
the-
sorry, I cut Jared off.
Not finished. What's important is that we have direction from you and that we can show that direction for staff. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
And I'm gonna agree with Jared. Sorry for cutting you off, Jared, to agree with you, but as the resolution was brought forth to the committee, you can make the change to the resolution before you send it up to the full board. It's not gone in front of the full board at this point. I would recommend, as you said, have a negative of the recommendations to not go forward with Panorama, not renew the contract, and seek another tool.
Okay.
To another surveying tool. And then whatever other language, but begin, because we need clear guidance for the district, for the administration on what, okay, if we don't have this, what do we do? Well, we want you to seek another tool.
Okay. Thank you, Jen, for that addition.
These are gonna be my best minutes ever.
Yeah, you got it. Okay. Was there anything else on the agenda today?
So I just
Hold
want
on,
to recap.
does the committee agree that?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, like, does the
Sorry.
committee agree with that?
Does the committee agree with that? Yeah.
Negative recommendation,
Explore other options.
explore other options. I'm good with that.
Thank you.
Diana, good. 4 of us, good. Awesome.
Thank you for taking that and understanding what I was trying to get. I wasn't trying to say the board should not have a voice to it. I just wanted to be sure.
Okay.
So
Not a typical
not renew
situation.
Panorama, but engage in a process to determine how to best analyze our data and make decisions.
You'll come up with something clever.
Got it. Like I said, best minute ever.
Okay. That is the last agenda item. Anything else?
Other action items that we took from today. I I already took care of emailing Margaret to get those staff survey questions out to the board. That action item has been enacted, but were there any other action items that the committee gave the administration?
There's the other referendum for Sarah for the special ed, is it the?
Yeah,
Special education
resolution.
resolution, and Jason and Jenny both have a couple of documents that had draft stamped on them. That I think we agreed as to when Jenny's is gonna come back, it's gonna be in the first quarter. Jason's, I'm not sure about yours, but you're still working on it to clean it up as far as an overarching document that's gonna be communicated to the parents sometime during orientation.
I would love to bring that back to this team, but.
Okay, when it's, convenient, and incorporate the other document as a standalone and make sure it's available.
And I just want to clarify a resolution for the purchase of stars through Renaissance.
Oh, right.
And I think
the
you had
stock
asked for
purchase.
Fastbridge to go on the same resolution.
Yeah, put those in the same.
I'll be at this question.
Okay.
And the action item that the special ed document will go onto the website.
Oh, right.
Jason, I believe we don't have. to have
We don't, it doesn't have to go to fiscal.
I believe though that has been out there earlier, but we can certainly, with this, we can still say, that services take care of this, we don't wanna keep passing things back and forth because.
Right.
So we don't need to.
Thank you.
Okay, adjourned. Thank you all.
David, congratulations on being 3 minutes shorter than the planning meeting last night. I appreciate that.
Boy,
Job
I could have made it another minute shorter had I known. Yeah.
You're the one who self-selected out,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, that's all I'm saying. I was looking like.
Sorry, yeah.